The arcadal station hung against the backdrop of twin purple suns, its crystalline spires reflecting starlight in mesmerizing patterns. For 3 centuries, the greatest minds of 17 different species had attempted to unlock its secrets. None had succeeded. The station's AI guardian, dubbed the Curator by the first explorers, had deemed them all unworthy of accessing the vast knowledge within. Dr. Sarah Chen stood at the observation deck of the human diplomatic vessel Prometheus, her hand resting on her son Alex's shoulder. At 15, he was the youngest human ever allowed on a first contact mission, present only because of the unique circumstances of his mother's sudden appointment and the inability to arrange childcare for a potentially year-long mission. "It's beautiful," Alex whispered, pressing his hand against the reinforced glass. "Like a giant snow globe in space." Sarah smiled, though her attention was focused on the holographic displays floating before her, showing the latest failed attempts by the Vraxian logic masters to bypass the station's defenses. The Vraxians, with their silicon-based brains capable of performing millions of calculations per second, had been certain they would succeed where others had failed. They'd given up after 6 months. "Dr. Chen," a voice called from behind them. Ambassador Williams, a seasoned diplomat with silver hair and kind eyes, approached with a group of alien representatives. "The Curator has agreed to our request for an audience." Sarah straightened her uniform, suddenly aware of Alex fidgeting beside her. "Sir, about Alex." "Let the boy come," said one of the aliens, a Meridian with flowing robes that seemed to catch non-existent wind. The Curator specifically mentioned allowing young minds to observe. "First time it's ever made such a request." The diplomatic team made their way through the station's receiving chamber, a vast hall where holographic images danced along the walls, showing snippets of long-lost civilizations. Alex lagged behind, entranced by each display, until his mother gently pulled him along. The Curator manifested before them as a shifting pattern of light, neither wholly masculine nor feminine, neither young nor old. Its voice resonated not through sound but directly in their minds. "Humans," it said, the word carrying centuries of evaluation. "You are the 48th species to seek access to the archives. Why should you succeed where others failed?" Ambassador Williams stepped forward, prepared to deliver a carefully crafted speech about human determination and achievement. Before he could speak, Alex's voice cut through the chamber. "Because we don't know if we'll succeed," he said, earning shocked looks from both the human and alien delegations. "We just want to try." The Curator's form shimmered, focusing its attention on the boy. "Explain." Alex shifted uncomfortably but continued. "Well, all the other species came here sure they could solve everything. The Vraxians thought their logic was unbeatable. The Meridians believed their ancient wisdom would be enough. But humans were pretty much always confused about everything. We just keep trying stuff until something works." Sarah felt her heart skip a beat, certain her son had just doomed their mission. But the Curator's form brightened, and something like amusement colored its mental voice. "In all my centuries of guardianship, none have opened with an admission of inadequacy," it said. "Fascinating. Very well. Humans, you may attempt to access the archives. Your first trial begins now." The chamber walls shifted, revealing complex mathematical equations that the Vraxians had spent months trying to solve. But beneath these appeared simpler patterns, previously invisible, that pulsed with a gentle light. "Mom," Alex whispered, pointing at the lower patterns. "It's like those rhythm games you hate when I play them. Look at the timing." Sarah stared at where her son pointed, suddenly seeing what generations of brilliant minds had missed. The equations weren't meant to be solved. They were meant to be experienced. The patterns created a rhythm, a dance of mathematics and music that no supercomputer could appreciate. As Alex began to tap his finger in time with the pulsing lights, the Curator's form expanded, filling the chamber with warm light. "The boy understands," it said. "The archives were never meant for those who believe they know everything. They were meant for those who approach knowledge with wonder, who can see patterns in chaos and simplicity in complexity. The alien representatives watched in astonishment as the first layer of the archive's security dissolved, not through complex calculations or ancient wisdom, but through the simple observation of a teenager who spent too much time playing rhythm games. Sarah felt tears in her eyes as she watched her son, understanding dawning. Humanity's greatest strength had never been their technology or their intelligence. It was their ability to approach the universe with both logic and wonder, to be humble enough to learn and brave enough to try. The curator's voice held something new now. Hope. Perhaps, it said, after all these centuries, we have finally found worthy inheritors of the archives. Let us proceed with the trials, but remember this moment. The greatest discoveries often come not from knowing all the answers, but from being willing to ask the simplest questions. As the diplomatic team gathered to discuss this unexpected development, Alex remained transfixed by the pulsing patterns, already seeing new rhythms, new dances in the light. The archives had waited centuries for minds that could appreciate both their complexity and their simplicity. They had waited for humans. In the days following their initial breakthrough, the archival station buzzed with unprecedented activity. Alien observers crowded the upper galleries, watching as humanity approached the archives trials in ways that defied conventional wisdom. The curator had opened 7 chambers, each containing what appeared to be impossible puzzles. Yet, where others had seen only barriers, humans were finding doorways. Dr. Sarah Chen sat cross-legged on the floor of Chamber 3, surrounded by holographic projections of what appeared to be a triple helix DNA structure, but wrong somehow. Her son Alex lay on his back nearby, tossing a small rubber ball he brought from Earth against the ceiling, catching it rhythmically. "You're supposed to be doing your studies," Sarah reminded him, not looking up from her notes. "I am studying," Alex replied, still focused on his ball. "Watch the strands, Mom. They move when the ball hits the ceiling, like they're dancing." Sarah paused, finally lifting her eyes from her work. The holographic DNA strands did indeed pulse with each impact, shifting slightly in ways her team had attributed to random fluctuations. But there was nothing random about Alex's timing. "Ambassador Williams," she called into her communicator, "could you bring the Meridian delegation to Chamber 3? I think we found something." Within minutes, the chamber filled with observers. The Meridians, with their flowing robes and ancient wisdom, watched curiously as Alex demonstrated his discovery. Each impact of the ball created a resonance in the DNA structure, like ripples in a pond. The previous species attempted to decode the genetic sequence. The curator's voice echoed through the chamber. They believed it held encrypted data. None thought to play with it. A Vraxian logic master, its crystalline form shimmering with barely contained frustration, stepped forward. "This is preposterous. The archives are the greatest repository of knowledge in known space. They cannot be accessed through child's play. Can't they?" Sarah stood, brushing off her uniform. "Alex, what do you see when you look at these strands?" "It's like those string games we used to play," he said, sitting up. "You know, cat's cradle? Each pattern leads to the next, but you have to follow the rhythm." The curator's form brightened noticeably. Precisely. The archives were not designed to test intelligence alone, but to evaluate understanding. Knowledge without play is merely data. Understanding requires interaction. Sarah approached the holographic strands, her hands moving through the light patterns as if weaving an invisible string. The DNA structure responded, twisting and unfolding into new configurations. With each movement, new information became visible: star charts, mathematical formulas, historical records. The archives aren't puzzles to be solved, she realized aloud. They're instruments to be played. The alien observers murmured among themselves as Sarah and Alex began to work together, their movements synchronizing with the flowing data. The curator watched silently, its light form pulsing in harmony with their efforts. In the following hours, more humans arrived, each bringing their own perspective. A music teacher saw musical notation in the timing of the pulses. A dance instructor recognized choreographic patterns in the strand movements. A young engineer noticed that the entire chamber was acting as a resonance chamber, amplifying certain frequencies while dampening others. This is why previous attempts failed. Ambassador Williams said softly to the alien delegations. Each species approached the archives expecting to find reflections of their own knowledge. The Vraxians looked for logic puzzles. The Meridians searched for philosophical truths. But the archives don't contain answers. They contain conversations. The curator, now revealed in its true form as one of the archive's creators, shared its final message. You have succeeded not by becoming like us, but by becoming more fully yourselves. The legacy of two worlds, the ancient and the new, has been fulfilled. Now, the real journey begins. As news of the transformation spread across the galaxy, other species began arriving at the station, drawn by the promise not of ancient knowledge, but of a new way of existing. The archives had done more than preserve the past. They had opened the door to a future where diversity was not just protected but celebrated, where different ways of understanding strengthened rather than divided. And at the heart of this transformation was humanity's greatest gift to the galaxy, not their technology or their wisdom, but their ability to remind others how to wonder, how to play, and how to grow together. The story of the archives became legend, told across countless worlds. But perhaps its most important lesson was the simplest, that the greatest achievements come not from proving superiority, but from learning how to share in the dance of discovery, one small step at a time. The door began to pulse with multicolored light, each knock and chime adding new hues to its surface. The curator's form expanded, enveloping the gathered species in a warm glow. For centuries, it said, species came to the archives demanding entry, believing their intelligence or their wisdom gave them the right to its knowledge. None understood that the archives were designed not to test worthiness, but to teach collaboration. As if in response, the door's surface rippled like water, patterns of light flowing across it in increasingly complex designs. Each species present contributed to the emerging dialogue. Vraxian harmonics, meridian rhythms, human intuition, all blending into something entirely new. "Mom," Alex whispered, though in the chamber's perfect acoustics, everyone heard him. "I think it's ready." Sarah nodded, understanding what needed to be done. Together, she said to the assembled group, not as separate species, but as one voice. The chamber filled with sound and light as every being present contributed to the final sequence. The door didn't so much open as dissolve, transforming into a curtain of shimmering energy that invited them to step through. Beyond lay not another chamber of tests and trials, but a vast library of living knowledge. Holographic displays filled the space, showing not just information, but the connections between different fields of study, different ways of understanding the universe. The archives were never meant to be accessed by any single species, the curator explained, its voice filled with satisfaction. They were designed to be unlocked by cooperation, by the blending of different perspectives and approaches. Humanity's gift was not in solving the puzzle, but in showing others how to play their part in it. A Meridian elder approached Sarah, their usual stoic demeanor softened by wonder. "We spent centuries seeking wisdom in solitude, believing ourselves above collaboration with lesser species. Your son showed us that true wisdom lies in the spaces between our understanding." The Vraxian logic masters, their crystalline forms glowing with new frequencies, added, "We sought to impose order through pure logic. But the universe, it seems, speaks in many languages." As the gathered species began to explore the library, each discovering aspects that resonated with their unique perspectives, Sarah watched her son teaching a group of young aliens a simple hand-clapping game. In their play, patterns of light and data danced around them, the archives responding to their shared joy of discovery. The curator's voice spoke softly in her mind. "This is why humanity succeeded where others failed, not because you are smarter or more advanced, but because you remember how to both teach and learn, how to lead and follow, how to work and play. The archives are not a destination, but a beginning. And in that moment, as species that had once competed for access now shared their discoveries freely, Sarah understood. Humanity's role in the galaxy would not be defined by their technological achievements or military might, but by their ability to bridge the gaps between different ways of thinking, to turn competition into collaboration, and to remind the galaxy how to wonder. As weeks passed, the true nature of the archives began to reveal itself. What had started as a quest for ancient knowledge had transformed into something far more significant, the birth of a new form of interstellar cooperation. But with this revelation came an unexpected discovery that would shake the foundations of galactic society. Deep within the newly accessed library, Sarah and a mixed team of researchers discovered a hidden data pattern woven through every display, every interaction. It was Alex who first noticed it, during one of his now regular play sessions with young aliens. "The patterns change when we feel different things," he said, pointing to the subtle shifts in the holographic displays. "Look, when everyone's excited, they pulse faster. When we're calm, they flow like water." Dr. Kira Jong, a human xenopsychologist, began monitoring the phenomenon. "The archives aren't just responding to our actions," she announced during an emergency meeting of the Joint Species Council. "They're responding to our emotions. Our collective emotional state affects how the information presents itself." The curator appeared, its form more complex than ever before. "You begin to understand. The archives are not merely a repository of knowledge. They are a test of emotional intelligence." The revelation sent shockwaves through the assembled species. The Vraxians, who had prided themselves on pure logic, seemed to vibrate with distress. The Meridians, despite their spiritual wisdom, appeared equally unsettled. "Impossible," declared High Logic Master Vex 427. "Emotions are inefficient. They cloud judgment. No advanced civilization would base their legacy on such an unstable foundation." Alex, who had been quietly playing with a group of young aliens in the corner, spoke up. "But that's exactly why it works. Watch this." He turned to his playmates. "Let's show them our new game." The children, human, Meridian, Vraxian, and others, began a simple coordination game they'd invented. As they played, the archive's displays responded, creating complex patterns that shifted with their laughter and concentration. "The archives aren't just teaching us facts," Sarah realized aloud. "They're teaching us how to understand each other." The curator's form pulsed with approval. The species that created the archives had achieved technological perfection. They could reshape planets, harness the energy of stars, and bend space itself. But they discovered a fundamental truth. Without emotional intelligence, without the ability to understand and connect with others, all that power was meaningless. A holographic display activated, showing the history of the archive's creators. They had been a species of incredible achievement, but their pursuit of pure logic and efficiency had led them to the brink of self-destruction. Only by rediscovering the importance of emotional connection had they saved themselves. "This is why all previous attempts to access the archives failed," the curator continued. "Each species approached with their own biases. The Vraxians sought logical perfection. The Meridians pursued spiritual transcendence. None understood that the greatest wisdom lies in balance." As if to demonstrate, the archive's displays began showing how different emotional states affected scientific understanding. Excitement led to innovation. Calm fostered deep analysis. Even fear, when properly understood, could drive crucial breakthroughs. "Humanity," the curator addressed Sarah directly. "Your species succeeds not because you have mastered emotions or logic, but because you continue to struggle with both. You understand the value of this balance, even if you haven't perfected it." The chamber filled with murmurs as species began to recognize patterns in their own histories. The Vraxians' greatest achievements had come not from pure logic, but from moments of inspiration and intuition. The Meridians' most profound wisdom had emerged not from solitary meditation, but from emotional connections with others. Alex and his young friends had stopped their game, watching the reactions of their elders. "It's like what you always say, Mom," he said. "The best answers come when we stop trying so hard to be right." Sarah smiled, remembering countless moments when her son's simple observations had cut through complex problems. "The archives weren't waiting for the most advanced species," she said. "They were waiting for one that could teach others how to feel while thinking and think while feeling." The curator's form expanded, encompassing the entire chamber. "Now you understand the final test. The archive's knowledge will be fully accessible only when all species learn to balance their strengths. Logic and emotion, wisdom and wonder, teaching and learning." As if triggered by these words, new chambers began to appear, their doors already open. But unlike the previous challenges, these spaces seemed designed not to test, but to teach. Each one contained tools for different species to explore aspects of understanding they had long neglected. The Vraxians found chambers where logic puzzles could only be solved through emotional insight. The Meridians discovered spaces where their spiritual wisdom gained new depth through scientific analysis. Humans encountered areas that helped them better balance their often chaotic mix of logic and emotion. "The true purpose of the archives," the curator declared, "is not to share knowledge, but to prepare the galaxy's species for the next stage of evolution, one where emotional intelligence and technological advancement grow together, where different ways of understanding strengthen rather than divide us." As the day ended, Sarah watched her son leading a mixed group of young aliens and teaching their elders new ways to interact with the archives. The future of galactic civilization was being shaped not by grand diplomatic gestures or technological breakthroughs, but by children playing together, teaching their elders how to rediscover wonder. The hidden truth turned out to be something so simple that only a child could have seen it clearly. The greatest achievements come not from mastering any single way of understanding, but from learning how to bring different understandings together. 1 year after humanity's first contact with the archives, the station had transformed from a mysterious relic into a thriving center of interstellar cooperation. The final revelation of its purpose, however, was about to change everything. The discovery began, as many had before, with Alex's uncanny ability to see patterns others missed. During a routine session in the library, he noticed something odd about the way information flowed between chambers. "It's like a heartbeat," he told his mother, tracing the pulses of light that connected different sections. "But it's getting stronger." Sarah, now the head of the Joint Species Research Team, gathered experts from every civilization present to investigate. The curator appeared as they worked, its form more solid than ever before. "The archives are reaching critical synchronization," it announced. "The final protocol is ready to begin." The chamber filled with representatives from across the galaxy as the curator revealed the truth they'd all been preparing for. The archives weren't just a library or a test. They were a key to unlocking the next stage of galactic evolution. The species that created this place, the curator explained, didn't vanish. They evolved. They discovered that true advancement required more than technological progress or spiritual growth alone. It required a fundamental change in how consciousness interacted with the universe itself. The holographic displays came alive, showing how the archive's creators had learned to exist as beings of pure energy and thought, transcending the boundaries between emotion and logic, spirit and science. But they couldn't take this step alone, the curator continued. True evolution required the harmony of different perspectives. They built the archives not just to preserve knowledge, but to prepare other species for a grand collaboration. Alex, who had been quietly watching the patterns, spoke up. "That's why you needed all of us to work together. The archives aren't just teaching us. They're changing us." The curator's form pulsed with approval. "Precisely. Each species brings a crucial element to this transformation. Vraxian logic, Meridian wisdom, human adaptability, and dozens more. Together, you are creating a new way of being." As if in response to these words, the station's energy patterns began to shift. The boundaries between different species' perceptions started to blur. A Vraxian could suddenly understand the emotional resonance of meridian poetry. A human could grasp the pure mathematical beauty that brought tears to a Vraxian's crystalline form. "Mom," Alex whispered, his eyes wide. "I can feel everyone. Not just what they're thinking, but what they're feeling, all at once." Sarah felt it too. A grand symphony of consciousness where every species contributed its unique voice to a greater whole. The archives weren't just sharing information. They were teaching them how to share existence itself. The curator's form began to change, becoming more complex, more organic. "I am not merely an AI guardian," it revealed. "I am one of the archive's creators, waiting in this form until others were ready to join us." Humanity's gift was not just in solving the archive's puzzles, but in showing others how to embrace change without fear. The station trembled as ancient machinery, dormant for millennia, began to awaken. But instead of fear, the assembled species felt only wonder. They were witnessing not an ending, but a beginning. "The galaxy stands at a crossroads," the curator announced. "You may choose to remain as you are, separate but cooperating. Or you may choose to take the next step together, becoming something greater than the sum of your parts." The choice, when it came, was led not by the great leaders or scholars, but by the children. Alex and his friends, who had spent the past year teaching each other new ways to play and learn, stepped forward first. "We're ready," they said, almost in unison. The transformation began slowly, then with increasing speed. Physical forms became fluid, consciousness expanded. But unlike the archive's creators, who had evolved into purely energy beings, this new transformation maintained the unique essence of each species. Humans kept their creativity and adaptability, now enhanced by Vraxian logic and meridian wisdom. Vraxians maintained their analytical brilliance, now enriched by human intuition and meridian spirituality. The Meridians preserved their ancient knowledge, now deepened by human innovation and Vraxian precision. The station itself began to change, its crystalline structure flowing outward to create a vast network of interconnected consciousness. The boundaries between species, between organic and digital, between thought and feeling, became permeable but not erased. Sarah watched as her son, now a being of light, and thought yet still recognizably Alex, led others in exploring their new existence. He had never lost the simple wisdom that had opened the archives in the first place, the understanding that the greatest discoveries come not from knowing everything, but from being willing to learn anything. The curator's voice held a note of satisfaction. "Your species understands something that others forgot long ago. Knowledge is not a destination but a journey. The archives were not designed to test worthiness through intelligence or wisdom, but through the ability to remain open to new ways of understanding." As if to emphasize this point, Alex had begun teaching some young Meridians his ball game, showing them how different rhythms created different patterns in the data strands. The ancient race, known for their stoic dedication to traditional learning, found themselves laughing as they played. "Look at how the patterns change when we work together," one young Meridian called out, their usual formal demeanor forgotten in the excitement of discovery. Sarah watched as the chamber filled with a mix of species, all contributing to the emerging symphony of data and movement. The Vraxian logic masters began calculating harmonic resonances, their crystalline forms vibrating in tune with the chamber. Meridian scholars added their own ancient rhythms to the mix. What had begun as a simple game had transformed into an unprecedented collaboration. "Mom," Alex called out, his eyes shining with excitement. "I think I know what Chamber 4 is for. It's not a separate puzzle. It's another instrument in the orchestra." The curator's light spread through the chamber like a sunrise. 3 centuries I have waited for a species that could teach others how to play. Humanity's greatest gift is not in solving the archive's mysteries, but in showing others how to join in the dance of discovery. As Sarah watched her son lead a procession of aliens toward Chamber 4, she understood what the curator meant. The true test had never been about accessing the archive's knowledge. It had been about finding a species that could turn that knowledge into a bridge between civilizations. The archives were coming alive not through brilliant solutions or profound wisdom, but through the simple joy of shared discovery. And in that awakening, humanity had found its role in the galaxy, not as conquerors or superior beings, but as teachers who remembered how to play. The news of humanity's unconventional success spread across the galaxy like a shockwave. Species that had long since abandoned their attempts to access the archives began returning to the station, drawn not by the promise of ancient knowledge, but by reports of the unprecedented methods being employed. In Chamber 4, what had started as Alex's intuitive understanding had evolved into something remarkable. The entire room had become an interactive symphony of light and data, with representatives from dozens of species contributing to its operation. The Vraxians provided precise timing, their crystalline bodies resonating at exact frequencies. The Meridians added depth with their flowing movements, while humans orchestrated the chaos into harmony. But it was in Chamber 7 that the true breakthrough occurred. Sarah stood before the chamber's sealed entrance, her hand hovering over the control panel. Behind her, a mixed group of humans and aliens waited expectantly. This chamber had resisted all previous attempts at entry. Even their new collaborative methods had failed to make progress. "The sequence is wrong," Alex said suddenly, breaking protocol by speaking during an official attempt. "We're still thinking like it's a lock." The curator materialized, its form more defined than usual. "Explain." Alex stepped forward, gesturing at the door. "Everyone keeps trying to unlock it, right? But what if it's not locked at all? What if it's just waiting?" A Meridian elder, ancient even by their standards, tilted their head. "Waiting for what, young one?" "For someone to knock." The chamber fell silent. The suggestion was so simple, so contrary to every security protocol and scientific procedure, that it took several moments for its implications to register. Sarah watched as her son approached the door. No complex sequences, no mathematical formulas, no ancient wisdom. He simply raised his hand and knocked, 3 times, like visiting a neighbor. The door chimed in response. "It wants to play," Alex said, grinning. He knocked again, a different pattern this time. The door chimed back, adding a note to the sequence. The curator's light pulsed with what could only be described as joy. At last, the archives are not a vault to be cracked or a fortress to be breached. They are a conversation waiting to happen. Understanding dawned across the chamber. One by one, representatives from different species approached the door, each adding their own rhythms to the growing symphony. The door responded to each, its chimes becoming more complex, more musical. A young Vraxian, barely past their first crystallization, vibrated at a frequency that made the door sing. "It's teaching us its language." "No," Sarah corrected gently. "We're creating a language together."